Good morning. We will call the Committee on Appointments to order at 8 a.m. It's very short docket here. First, we have a resolution confirming City Manager Washington's appointment of Brooke Oosterman to the Grand Rapids Housing Commission.
So moved.
Supported. Any conversation on that appointment?
I'll just add one, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. I'll just add, Ms. Osterman had previously served on our Brownfield Authority, was previously the Executive Director of Housing Next, and has taken a new role on at the YMCA working in childcare, which I think, some may think, oh gosh, how does that relate to housing? But we know that housing, childcare, transportation are, largest expenses for families. So I'm glad that Ms. Osterman accepted city manager's, appointment and will serve on that body. And so even though it's not, an organization of the city, we work really closely. So I know they'll be happy to get that seat filled after, I think, Pat Miles Sr. served on for many years, but I think termed out or resigned, I can't remember now, but served a very long time. So thank you.
Great history. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Robbins? All set? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Now, before we get to our discussion on current board and vacancy and commission list here, I'd like to ask my colleagues a few questions. I have a appointment for the Public Safety Committee. They are a member of the ACLU. And there were a few concerns that were raised within a few departments here at the city, and just wanted to hear your feedback on whether we should move forward with an ACLU appointment, or I can always sort of go back to the drawing board and find another. But I was really excited about the conversation is more, I'd like it more to be on the organization rather than zeroed in on the specific individual. The concerns were, since the ACLU is actively suing the city for different things that they may not want to infringe upon court proceedings with having an individual from their organization on the Public Safety Committee. I understand that concern, but I believe, especially the individual that I had picked, will, be very respectful. And of course, as much as they could infringe or have something difficult happen, it could go the other way, right? Where the ACLU could have something said, or, and I believe that they both could be professionals and not speak about the current case. The ACLU, that's sort of how they do their advocacy, is through court proceedings. I believe that the ACLU and myself have worked on specifically our unarmed responses or our co-response teams, which is something that the chief of police is very proud of and wants to continue to expand. So that is why I really want the ACLU at the table as someone who can support these efforts that we are doing in the Grand Rapids Police Department. So that is what, these are one-year tenures, and that is what I was hopeful that the ACLU could do, is to help us with measures that we have going on and to respectfully work side by side with our police department to increase and enhance our public safety that we have for the city. So would love your thoughts and recommendations on if you would support someone from the ACLU, and if that seems like a too much of a challenge or something you may not like to do, I'd love to hear your concerns.
Do you want me to go first? Sure, I'm happy to go first. I know you and I talked about this last week, so thanks for bringing it up. I think it's good to talk about these things in a formal setting. I was thinking back, and I think this is hard because you kind of, sometimes the individual, we're not saying the individual's name, just so everybody knows, to protect that person, because they may or may not be appointed. We do that for anybody, right? Because they may or may not, maybe they have something with the city and they have had arrears and they haven't paid it. So that's, we're not beating around the bush, so to speak. I would say, knowing the individual, I think strong collaborative background for sure, have appreciated their efforts on a number of things related to the city. They're also, can't remember what ward they live in, but, live in this community as well. I thought back to a situation that was a difficult one, maybe about 2 years ago. and where we did have somebody, a very different situation, but they had some court proceedings, which created a situation where we needed to remove the person from the board, which was challenging because, again, that is public, and so sometimes we allow people, sometimes they have the opportunity to resign, sometimes they might not choose to do that. I've been really in the spirit of kind of just wanting to be clear, kind, and committed. As my mom reminds me, remember you said that? I do think it's about timing. So I would say that we do have some precedent for those that have, and I know this person isn't the individual person who is filing that lawsuit, all right? And I mistakenly thought it was a different agency, not the ACLU, and I think another agency does have a lawsuit against us as well. And so I wonder if maybe it's not a no, but it's not now. I don't know how quickly that will get resolved. I hope it does, because I think, to your point, sometimes those legal proceedings is what does create the ball to kind of get things moving, to say, I mean, hopefully you do it before then, but if that isn't happening, that is why people have the ability, and we live in the United States, you have the ability to do that, and it's wonderful. So I wonder if could it be a not now? Could we see where that lands, maybe, knowing that we're about halfway through the year, see where the half of the year takes us, and then review it at that time? I think, just in that spirit of being clear. We've had proceedings in the past where we've said no to people or removed them. So as the past chair, I want to stay consistent with that. So then another decision in the past is not questioned. Kind is appreciate the individual. We all have jobs and we're all associated with places, and we may or may not like that. And I think, but we are, right? Like, we are extensions of our organizations in many ways. And then also look for ways that this person could be involved in other ways. I mean, I think my question last week around the traffic stop study, I do have a number of questions about just how do we stay on top of this? Like, what's the baseline? It's been some time. And so, what happened, again, we're not talking specifically about traffic stops, but as you talked about more unarmed responses, how can we make sure that something that might be the most common way that people interact with our police force doesn't result in a deadly situation? So those are my thoughts, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to elaborate more. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And just a reminder for the public, to my knowledge, and we talked with the law department, who also had a concern about this, and there is not a rule for this. So yes, that has been passed, some past cases, but we would be breaking no rule. I want to be very open and transparent with the public that I would, of course, never push for us to not abide by our charter or our rules for committees. So this is one of those things where a lot of times in policy where you're sort of living in gray area. So just want to make note of that. Commissioner Robbins, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you being forthright about this and the concerns, and reaching out to the city staff to talk them through. I think my thoughts are very much in line with my colleagues. I think, saying that we're an extension of our workforce is just a reality, like, could be the best person ever. I'm sure there's someone who's passionate about the city, passionate about serving and things like that. But I think it is always tough when an organization that you work for, aside from serving in a public capacity, sometimes has like an adversarial relationship or complicated relationship with the place that you're trying to be serving. So I certainly understand the concerns, I think, of the legal department. So I know there's been, in other cases too, like we try to err on the side of caution with those things. I know the mayor on a number of occasions has, recused himself from a vote where maybe there's no direct, conflict of interest, but just in the spirit of trying to go above and beyond to make it clear that that's not the case. I think that's typically, at least in my experience, the past couple of years, how we try to operate, from the dais. And so, I guess I would be nervous about bringing someone on that would be, part of an organization that also has ongoing, lawsuits, litigation, conflict with the city as well. So I think, to Commissioner Isasi's point too, like, if it's somebody who you think provides some really good insight and things, would be happy to consider where else maybe we could find for them to serve. So I don't know that at this point I'd feel comfortable moving forward with that. I'm happy to read through some of the recommendations that maybe the law department had given you or something like that, if that would make you happy. But I'd probably err on the side of caution, I would say. So.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also want to say, for this committee, the folks who they have done some really transformative things in the past. But the civilian members still serve in a very advisory role. So when it comes to a vote, the actual vote would be, as you know, Commissioner, yourself, Mayor LeGrand, and myself, as if there's a formal vote taken. So, it's still a very advising role. But thank you for your feedback, and it sort of sounds like I don't think we would support in this moment, right? Maybe at a time when they are not suing the city is sort of what I heard from Commissioner Isasi, right? Of timing is more of it. And then erring on, of course, caution of not wanting to really abide in that gray area. So for both of you, timing is more of the thing of not saying that someone could never from this organization serve, but because there's active pending legislation, you all would like to go with someone else. I will say then sort of back to the drawing board for me with my appointment. And of course, I'm really focusing on folks who have direct experience, direct background, who can really add to this this committee. And in addition, we have no women on this committee. So I am actively looking for, I think those perspectives are just very important to not have an all-male. It's very diverse, that board, but I was looking these past few times and I'm like, who resigned? Our neighbor who resigned was our only female woman appointee. So, those are some things to think about. Thank you very much for your comments, colleagues. And yes, Commissioner.
I don't want to, you were on a flow, but I just wanted to add, one, thank you for thinking about the makeup of the body. I know we've talked about that quite a bit. And then, something that struck me the other day, and I know this has been a focus for you, which I know sometimes can be hard, but really somebody who is a young person, like a truly, a young person, not that you two are not young people. For the record, Janessa. No, but, I think like we had, all joking aside, like a lot of the decisions we make is really impacts, young, they're seeing this and what is their experience. I think after, I know you had a conflict, a long-time conflict, Commissioner, but after the last meeting, I had heard from some people about an individual who's engaged, who was in one of the protests post mistrial and was somebody who was differently abled, used a wheelchair. And so I had a good conversation at Summit with a couple of people about what are other individuals' experiences. Again, thinking about my own privilege, and like that wasn't something I had thought about. And so I just offer those two pieces as, sometimes I think it's always trying to find somebody like, obviously you want somebody from the ward, you want, again, thinking of that makeup, but I just think also I'll just mention those two demographic groups as well.
Yeah, that is great, especially for public safety. It's just one of the most unifying committees I think we have because it's for everyone. We did have with Andrew's appointment from Commissioner Belchak, there was a youth edition that he's under 30. So that felt like, all right. But these are good things to think about. Anything else, colleagues? Yes.
Yeah, just one more thing to add. I also appreciate the makeup of the board comment and awareness too. I think one thing too for me, my personal approach, I would say, is sometimes I try and find people who don't have a background in something. I think sometimes, if you work within a certain realm or, organization, a group of organizations, sometimes there's like a group thought or, there's just a lot of familiarity between those organizations. And so one thing that I've found a lot of value in is, finding people who I just think they have good soft skills, good values, and they're committed to the city and to serving. And I think that I've found a lot of benefit in hearing their perspectives, being new, not having any previous bias or understanding about what historical precedence has been, but being able to see things from a fresh perspective and ask some questions and start from a lower level of understanding. I think that oftentimes too has a lot of benefit. So I would encourage that to be just an approach that you could always take too. So
yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from that is something I 100% agree with. Of there's a space for experts and there's a space for advocates, someone who this deeply cares and has the energy for it. That's the big thing with all of these boards too. Is are you going to be able to come and serve and show up and not miss 50% of the meetings? So, so lastly, that brings us to discussion on current board and commission vacancy list, and I believe the staff has some notes for us here.
Yes, I do.
Yes, Ms. Bosker.
We have obviously not very many appointments today.
Yes.
There's a few in the pipeline, but I'm hoping to have a few more on the schedule for June. It might not be this next meeting. It will probably be later, just with working through vetting and people on leave, and we're getting into vacation season. Things are kind of slowing down. But I'm looking at hopefully making an appointment to Economic Development Corporation, and the North Quarter and Michigan Street Corridor Improvement Authorities, hopefully. I also just sort of follow up to our discussion last week on the Land Bank Authority. There should be some more clarification on the timeline after the June 10 meeting. And then I did create a separate board on our online application so people can apply for that separately now. And I worked with the Economic Development Department to determine like a specific question just to sort of get some background. So hopefully we'll start to get some individual applications, or if you'd like, you can start referring people to apply for just that board if they're interested.
Wonderful. And I know for the, you said for Brownfield?
That one is for the land bank.
The land bank, yes. So the land bank, I know we specifically are going to ward by ward also think of appointments too. So I'll remind folks to start thinking of that as you all connect with your colleagues, and I will connect with my colleague in the third ward to start thinking of that, because that's going to be a very transformative community project. So thank you, Ms. Bosker. Any other updates? Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. I just had a quick question on the Kent Hospital Finance Authority, which is sort of like this is one of those authorities where it typically is a staff member. And so I know we had a staff member. Had they completed their PIF? Okay.
Yep,
So they're
I
just going through the vetting?
Just skipped over that. That appointment should be at the next meeting.
Okay,
It will be
wonderful.
on the next.
Okay.
Agenda.
Can we scroll down and then what, does the mayor, Mr. Chair, Ms. Bosker, is there a name for the planning commission that is being vetted right now too?
Not that I've heard
Okay.
of. We have quite a few applicants that we've just had
Okay.
over the last little
Yeah.
while. I haven't heard anything.
Okay, there was a name that I forwarded, and it was probably a month ago, Mr. Chair. I can follow up with you after the meeting with the name. I think they've completed the PIF. I think they, have some good experience to serve on that body, but I don't know all the names that the mayor's vetting, but I'll follow up with you.
Yes,
immediately after, if
please.
that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, the Planning Commission is another, they're all important, but that
Right.
one makes such community-based, sort of out front decisions that people see very
Yes.
frequently. So I know we'd want all of those
Yep.
vacancies filled as soon as we can.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes. All right, well, thank you, staff, and thank you, colleagues. We will adjourn the committee on appointments at 8:18 a.m.
All right, good morning, everybody. It is 8:30. We'll go ahead and get our fiscal committee meeting here underway. We've got 7 items before us on the docket. So item number 1, we're starting with a resolution authorizing a budget substitution for multiple lift station projects in the combined amount of $985,000.
So moved.
All right, moved and supported. I believe. Oh, it's coming. All right.
Connie's being silly.
Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. So this morning we bring a resolution for a budget substitution. This is for multiple lift station upgrades. This is for Orchard Vista, Alpine Estates, and Collindale Gravity Sewer. For all 3 lift stations, it requires relocating the electrical equipment. Currently, they're in can-style lift stations. This brings them to the surface and gets them out of the humidity and makes it safer to work on. For Orchard Vista and Alpine Estates, it calls for replacing outdated pumps. And for Collindale Gravity Sewer, it also includes a sinking manhole repair.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or discussion, colleagues? Hearing and seeing none. All right, I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. Item number 2, we've got a resolution authorizing a budget substitution for the sewer portion of the Fuller Ave Kalamazoo to Adams project in the amount of $100,000.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Back to you.
Good morning. I'll take this one again.
All right.
So this is for a budget substitution for $100,000. This is to right-size the sewer line on Fuller Avenue between Kalamazoo and Adams. This is actually like a bottleneck, and it's just to right-size the sewer line. And it's in conjunction with Vital Streets.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Questions, colleagues? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. Item number 3, we've got a resolution authorizing a budget substitution of $198,000 for water portion of the Fuller Avenue from Kalamazoo to Adams project. So it looks like this is related to our previous item here.
It is. This is essentially to, sorry.
Do we have support? Thank you. All right, moved.
Sorry.
So excited.
A little anxious this morning.
Morning.
This is essentially to make the project whole for water. The project will be done, I think, by end of June, and essentially bids came in, and water had about $600,000 budgeted. Came in a little bit over budget for water's share of it. There was a little bit of increased scope of work, so
Okay.
making it whole.
Okay, so previous resolution for the sewer portion, this one's specific to water.
Yep, that is correct.
Cool. All right, any other questions? All righty, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That carries. Item number 4, we've got a resolution authorizing a budget substitution of $2,455,000 for park capital projects.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Good morning, Mr. Marquardt.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is a simple accounting of park funds, so essentially shifting park bond funding that was sprinkled amongst several different projects throughout the park system and moving them into the Canal Park project that we know is advancing rapidly. It's under construction currently. And those remaining projects will then be funded by our Parks Millage funding on an annual capital rolling basis.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or discussion, colleagues?
Just one question. How many other projects then is this going to impact when you switch those funds over to the Canal Park?
It impacts roughly a little over a half dozen projects, but just to be reminded, those projects are being funded by our Parks Millage funding, so no change in process.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. It carries. That'll bring us to item number 5. We've got our bid list resolution for May 20th, 2025.
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. I'll turn to our acting CFO.
Good morning, Commissioners. Real short bid list today. We have 3 items on it, all pretty standard operating items. We have hauling and disposal of non-hazardous waste for the ESD department. We have a 3-year extension agreement for some software at the Dev Center. And then lastly, a cooperative agreement through the Kent County Road Commission for purchase and delivery of various gas and diesel fuels for use citywide. And I'll just note on that one, the amount, $3.2 million, is exactly the same amount as 3 years ago. Although our usage has declined due to electric vehicles in the fleet, compressed natural gas vehicles, the price per unit has increased, not surprisingly, I guess, last 3 years. So it kind of offsets each other, and we end up at the same amount. So.
Okay. And I know, I believe that was on page 14, if anybody listening and wants to go check out and read more into those. I'll turn to my colleagues real quick. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That carries. So that will bring us to item number 6. We've got our comptroller's warrant report for the period of April 29th, 2025 through May 5th, 2025 in the amount of $3,547,372.73. And I will turn to our city comptroller.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
For the period reference, cash payments were released totaling approximately $3.5 million. During that period, there was not a payroll related payments made, but there were $750,000 in income tax warrants issued. There's limited activity here due to the transition of the city's financial system, and as stated here in the memo, any funds mentioned there were issued by individuals not in the city comptroller's office and not in accordance with the city charter.
Okay, that is received and filed. Thank you. Lastly, we'll turn for item number 7. We've got our treasurer's report for period of April 30th, 2025 through May 7th, 2025.
So move.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners.
Good morning.
I wish I had better news for you. Unfortunately, I don't.
Sure.
Due to primarily federal economic policy uncertainty, most notably with respect to trade and tariffs, a majority of economists are now indicating that the U.S. is that our domestic economy is likely to enter recession later this year. That does put the Federal Reserve in a bit of a box because inflation is still above target. It's close. It's come down significantly from its peak a few years back, but it is still too high. Normally, when inflation is high, the Fed combats that by raising interest rates, which slows economic activity and brings down prices, or at least price inflation, I should say. Unfortunately, when recessions happen, the opposite medicine is called for. Rates need to be cut in order to spur economic growth. Well, you've got a conundrum because no matter which course of action the Fed takes, if it maintains high rates, that's going to harm the economy in terms of employment, that sort of thing. If it lowers rates, that has a potential to harm the economy in terms of price levels that consumers see. So it's always the Fed always has to act as a bit of a balancing act between those risks. Overall, it's done a fairly decent job as of late under Chairman Jerome Powell's leadership. However, the math is the math, and it is difficult to be avoided. Now, of course, there's a chance that a majority of economists are wrong. I certainly hope they are. And the U.S. may rectify the various, conclude trade negotiations positively in an expeditious manner, and we move on, and this is simply a blip. Unfortunately, that does not appear to be likely. In a broader picture, the bond market has been in a secular bull market roughly since 1981, and that came to an end in the depths of COVID in late 2020. And what that means is that we became very accustomed over time to really not have to worry about cost of capital at all. And that really didn't enter as a major factor in decision-making, and that is going to have to, unfortunately, change going forward. That is simply the world we live in. Difficult decisions will need to be made on your part of what projects to pursue and which ones to leave behind. In addition, as you no doubt have heard, Moody's Investor Service downgraded the United States debt over the weekend from AAA to AA1. It joins the other two major rating agencies in that action. Standard & Poor's did that quite some time ago, and Fitch just a couple years ago. Overall, that doesn't necessarily add new information to the economy per se, but rather simply a new analysis. It will affect some marginal buying of Treasury securities on the fringes, especially by foreign sovereigns with particular credit mandates. But overall, the net effect is higher cost of capital. Having said all that, our investment balances are, as of this report, at their low water mark within our fiscal cycle. So expect the numbers to climb over time as obviously when July rolls around, income tax or property tax receipts roll in. But even more than that, over the next several days, our cash position improves, and in the last couple of weeks we have as well. But having said that, as of this report, the city's investments stood at $657 million and change, yielding 3.27%. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. I have a quick question. I know if majority of economists are forecasting some sort of recession later this year, is there any indication? I mean, the word recession can be broad. It could be brief and shallow. It could be long and, much more serious. So, like, is there any indication if this is like an 08, 09 recession? Is it more like a few years back when it was, 2 quarters? Or is it still too early to tell?
It's definitely in the third camp, too early to tell.
Okay.
There's a wide range of opinions on the matter. I will say, if you asked me the same question back in February or March, the answer would have been most likely very mild. Mm-hmm. Obviously, since that point in time, trade tensions and what we're seeing at ports certainly has become more of a factor.
Okay. Well, that's good information to have. All right, I'll turn to my colleagues and see if they have any questions or thoughts.
Lots of thoughts, but I'll keep them. Thank you very much, Comptroller and Treasurer, for your reports this morning.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right, we'll go ahead and receive and file that, and that will conclude our business. So we'll wrap up here at 8:43.
morning. The time's now 9:15, and we can go ahead and call our Community Development Committee meeting to order. Good morning, colleagues. We have a short agenda, and the first one is a resolution confirming special assessment nuisance roll number 8794. Do you have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Ms. Jastifer?
Sorry, not used to being first. Good morning. So at the direction of the City Commission order from January 14th, the Assessor's Office prepared a special assessment roll 8794, which is comprised of unpaid lienable charges for services from July 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. Property owners were sent notices on March 20th, notified of the charge and the appeal process. In addition, the assessor's office posted the entire roll on the city's website and had it open for the minimum 2 weeks, which was starting March 20th through April 29th. And then the City Commission sat as a board of review to hear appeals on April 29th, and a total of 12 appeals were submitted. The city assessor and city attorney's office has reviewed the appeals with the departments where the charges originated, and upon review of these cases, it is confirmed that the city acted with full transparency and followed all appropriate procedures dictated by the city ordinances. So we are requesting that you confirm the special assessment roll in the amount of $503,372.91 and authorize the city treasurer to place those charges on the July 1st summer tax statement.
Colleagues, questions? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is a resolution approving an increase of $464,465 for 300 Monroe accessibility improvements for a total not to exceed $3,970,225.
So moved.
Moved and supported. Mr. Berkman?
Good morning, Commissioners. So this project is underway. Construction began in November of last year, and this is what will install an elevator, bringing access to the Monroe level, to all levels of the parking ramp beneath us. It'll also add new storefront doors to the ramp, from the ramp into the building, and improve some ADA-compliant parking spaces within our parking deck. So all part of accessibility enhancements to the government center. When the project was designed, we had originally considered bringing it up to the plaza level, but it was decided not to proceed at that time because of the unknown nature of what we were going to do as far as the overall Calder Plaza enhancements. Now that we've gotten further along in that conceptual development process, it's become clear that we should have that additional access, and this makes the most sense to include it. So basically adding another lift to the elevator, bringing it up to the plaza level. It would be in the northern portion of the county building within the county clerk space. A vestibule will be added so that you can access the plaza level from this parking ramp elevator. So this action would add that scope and the cost of the project to bring it up the additional level. Seeking your approval then to increase that scope and authorize the expenditures, bringing the total not to exceed amount to what was read of just over $3.9 million. That funding will come from the Capital Improvement Fund and Parking System Fund for the city's share, and then the county's share will come from their Facilities Management Fund. Also wanted to take the opportunity to look ahead as far as what's on the horizon for the Calder Plaza enhancements. We've developed a concept plan that was really built on some significant engagement that was done in 2017 and some post-pandemic revisioning. This was done to determine what enhancements we should add when we come through and replace the deck and do the waterproofing project, which will begin next year in 2026. So we've issued an RFP for a construction manager. We're currently interviewing firms that have responded to that RFP, and we'll be bringing an item for you for consideration at your June 10th meeting to engage that construction manager. But that will help us as we, develop cost estimates, refine the scope, truly, determine what enhancements can we incorporate into that deck replacement project. So more to come on that, but today's item is specifically dealing with that elevator access component, bringing it up to the plaza level.
Thank you, Mr. Berkman. Questions, colleagues?
Did I hear you correctly that it will be, this extra elevator will be in a different spot, or it's going to be in the same spot?
Same spot.
Same
And
spot.
so, yeah, and so you can picture it, you can see the work that's underway in the north stairwell when you're down on the Monroe level. That's the column or the corridor through which the elevator will come up, which would land in the north side, the really northern edge of the county building in their clerk space.
Thank you so much. Hearing no other questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 3 is a resolution awarding a contract with Anlon Corporation for improvements to Gillette Bridge in the amount of $467,985 with a total amount not to exceed of $866,000.
So moved.
Moved and supported. Mr. Berkman, again?
Yes, so if you've walked the Gillette Bridge recently, you've noticed that the deck is in pretty rough shape, has been for some time. This project will remove and replace the existing concrete deck. It'll sandblast and paint the railing and parapet walls that are along the edges of the bridge, some minor other repair work and refurbishment of the existing light poles. There's 12 of them along that bridge. We received 5 bids for the project. Anlon provided the low bid of $467,985, which includes 2 alternates that we added to the base bid, covering that parapet wall and electrical improvements within the confines of the bridge. That was under the engineer's estimate of just over $567,000. With the bridge being 110 years old, we did include a larger contingency of about 32% in the project to address any unforeseen issues when we get into removal of the deck. We're also working with DGRI on the addition of a 50-amp power circuit to help with larger events and power needs. That would also come from that contingency amount once the final route is determined of how to supply that power. Requesting your approval then for that award amount to Anlon and authorizing the total of $866,000, which will come from Capital Improvement Fund as well as a contribution from the Downtown Development Authority. As far as timing, we'll keep everything in place for the 4th of July fireworks, but immediately thereafter, around July 6th, we'll get into it, remove the deck, and plan is to have it completed by Labor Day.
Thank you for that timeline as well. Colleagues, questions?
So I did not know that the pedestrian bridge between DeVos and the Anabawan Park was called the Gillette Bridge. So that's my aha learning moment. And I didn't realize it was 110 years old either. So it's good to see that will be fixed and replaced. And just wanted to put that out there for anyone else who just calls it the pedestrian bridge like me.
And one other fun trivia piece, it's a former interurban rail line that used to carry rail line, streetcars, railway across that bridge before it became what it's used for today. So.
Hearing no other questions, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 4 is a resolution scheduling a public hearing for June 10th, 2025 to consider an obsolete property rehabilitation certificate pursuant to Public Act 146 of 2000 for ICCF Nonprofit Housing Corporation at 2017 Eastern Avenue Southeast.
So moved.
Ms. Renero?
Good morning, thank you. This is a project at Burton and Eastern, just south of Burton, at the, if you can picture the post office there. This is a activation of 17,000 square feet of a 2-story building for 15 mixed-income apartments with 1 to 2 bedrooms. Anticipated eligible investment, $3.6 million. This is a project that's been taken over by ICCF and may look familiar because this project was awarded RAP, RAP 2.0 dollars from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And this project also had been previously approved for a district for an OPRA back in 17, but the previous developer had never paid the fee for the certificate, so we're doing that now. So this is setting the public hearing on June 10th, and this qualifies for a 12-year OPRA abatement based on multiple objectives for prioritization, including micro-local, women-owned, and minority-owned business subcontractors, as well as facilitating housing supply. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is that the Southtown CIA also contributed a $10,000 facade grant.
Thanks, Ms. Renero. Any questions, colleagues? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we can adjourn our Community Development Committee at 9:25. Thank you.
Committee of the Whole come to order. First on our agenda is, I have the wrong date in here. Can I have some of the agenda? No, I don't have this. Resolution approving the Neighborhood Investment Plan, funding awards and submission of the FY 2026 Annual Action Plan totaling $8,700,000 roughly. Ms. Bohut, you want to come up and talk briefly? And as you come up, I will.
So moved.
Support.
I will note, we have global good news here. We had some uncertainty about whether money was coming through, and we seem to be on the other side of that uncertainty.
Yes, we are. So, and this is our last step in our funding process, annual funding process that began in January. So your approval today will establish those final project awards, allocating nearly $8.7 million in Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnerships, Emergency Solutions Grants, Justice Assistance Grants programs, as well as the Affordable Housing Fund and Opioid Settlement Funds. So all that allocation occurred in one process, as we have been doing on an annual basis for many years. The funding recommendations were presented to the full City Commission on March 25th, and these were based on estimates, as Mayor LaGrand just mentioned, because we did not have our final program awards from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Those came just last week, and those happened to be just a little bit more than we anticipated for the Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Investment Partnerships Program, and then slightly less for our emergency shelters grants. So specifically, CDBG increased $35,407, and our home allocation increased $42,661, and then ESG decreased $1,290. So not big changes, but very happy of where we're positioned considering things that are going on now. Adjustments were made to the projects that's included in your resolution that followed our contingency provisions that we put in those recommendations that identified what would happen if each of these funding sources were increased or decreased. So we followed that, those established contingency provisions and made those adjustments. Your approval today also authorizes community development staff to submit the annual action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The plan is actually our application for the CDBG, home, and ESG programs. And as required by HUD, we held a 30-day public comment period that included a public hearing that was in front of you on April 15th. Written comments were received through April 24th and forwarded to you as well. And I just want to wrap up by thanking Commissioners Assassi, Kilgore, and Robbins for their work in the RFP work group in terms of helping develop the recommendations, bringing forward to you, as well as community development staff who really do a lot of the heavy lifting and reviewing those applications and getting them to that point. That's Erin Banchoff, Joanna Schulte, Ben Grostic, Camilla Johnson, Amy Brower, and Tammy Vincent.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from commissioners? We've gone over this in broad concept before. Commissioner Sasek.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Bohach, for the overview. I think that was a nice email to get after our last meeting, that those pieces were confirmed. Just wanted to remind everyone, as we're going through our budget process, these are, federal dollars, and we do look at a variety of factors when we have that subcommittee. And there's a lot of information provided about the communications that the department has with the different organizations who are receiving funding. There are different requirements because of these federal dollars. In my day job, I have a lot of federal funding, and there is a lot of compliance and tracking and different pieces that are noted. And so I just wanted to highlight that those pieces were also reviewed by this committee, just to, another further step in compliance. Certainly that's something you all are doing, but that is shared with that body as well. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. That brings us to our next item of business, resolution, and I'll ask Ms. Renero to come up for this.
That's a long title.
Pardon?
That's a long title.
So moved.
Yeah, sorry. The city manager was laughing about the long title here. I'm going to wade through it just because this is an open meeting. This is a resolution providing 2026 budgets for the Grand Rapids Brownfield Development Authority, Grand Rapids Economic Development Corporation, Grand Rapids Land Bank Authority, Grand Rapids Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority, West Side, Southtown, Michigan Street, South Division Granville, North Quarter, and Uptown Quarter Improvement Authorities, and Uptown Business Improvement District. Ms. Renero, that's a whole basket of things that a lot of people in the town care about, and I think we may have covered just about every corner of the city there.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Yes, this is the 11 different authorities that the Economic Development Department administers, and I'm happy to go through. Should I go through each authority? Okay, I wasn't sure the formality here. So I feel like what you're broadly going to see here is tremendous growth between all of our authorities. And I'm happy to go into detail if you have any questions.
Mayor, Ms. Renero did an excellent job last week covering those during the budget work session. And just for point of reference, we would normally vote on all these individually 11 times. This year, we bundled them to see how the conversation goes. And if need be, in the future, we will vote on them seriatim again.
Great. So first of all, did I get a motion? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yes.
Usually Commissioner Usasi is pretty quick off the mark on that. Thank you. And is there any discussion or comments? Seeing Commissioner Usasi.
I think, thank you for the bundling, because I think it makes sense. A reminder to the public that each one of us serves on one of these authorities. Well, not always necessarily Brownfield or the Land Bank, but I do serve on Smart Zone and Brownfield, and so we all have that opportunity to see what those pieces are in our authorities. I think it's an exciting time for authorities to really, many of us, I think we've heard stories about like Southtown adding to housing projects, looking at how to redo different facade grants. And so I think it's just a reminder that we want to, I don't want to speak for everybody, but that we've been having this conversation about how these authorities, how could we even maximize them even more? So, and I do see Vera out in the audience. I want to say thank you for, it's not all of but the corridor improvement authorities. And so I see you in the audience. I want to thank you for your work, especially sometimes with these authorities, we don't always have kind of that consistent corridor manager, or might not have the corridor manager. And thank you to, others in the department, certainly Jordan on Smart Zone. Now I'm getting into the problem where I start naming off people. But anyways, I just wanted to highlight that from the corridors, because I think we're at this point where we're going to keep on pushing. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion and having had this as part of the review last week, I'd ask for a vote and support then. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Brings us thematically to a very similar item. That is resolution for the 26 budgets for the DDA, Downtown Development Authority, and the Downtown Improvement District, and the Monroe North Tax Increment Finance Authority, which we often acronym as TIFAs. Ms. Renero.
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kelly.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Similar to your last item, this was part of your briefing last week. I don't have anything to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you do. Just a reminder, these were all recommended to you by the respective boards and authorities representing the Downtown Development Authority, Downtown Improvement District, and Monroe North Tax Increment Finance Authority.
And I'll, echo what Commissioner Sassi said, and also point out that, in a sense, these two are closely thematically related in the sense that historically we've had a DDA for a long time, but these other neighborhood associations are sort of coming along and doing the same sort of work in different regions. So this is maybe a less centralized way to focus on individual projects, and obviously some of us, I think a number of us, were at groundbreaking for Canal Park, and so DDA plays in a lot of things inside of its boundaries and does a whole lot more than maybe people think of as its core function of keeping downtown looking good and functioning well, but it's also playing in long-term investments. So thank you, Mr. Kelly. And any discussion of this one? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you.
This brings us to three things which I believe our city manager is going to brief us on, so if we can take them sequentially. The first is resolution establishing 2025 property tax millage.
Support.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just highlight both the property tax millage, the provision of fees, and the budget briefing all into one, and then you guys can deliberate and vote after that. So if someone can pull up the slides, please. And while he's doing that, I want to thank our acting CFO, Scott Sandin, for his work, and glad to see the return of our CFO, Molly Claren, back to work yesterday. So she is in other meetings today, and look forward to her re-engaging. So again, today is the day for your adoption of the budget, the tax rate, and the fees. The budget you'll vote on in your afternoon meeting itself. This morning is affirming the revenue, and I'll also highlight some of the changes that we have made from introduction to adoption. Next slide. And just as a reminder, we've had several public sessions on the budget since its public proposal, to include your most recent hearing last week that allowed the public to comment on anything that was discussed in the work sessions or anything that's in the budget. Next slide. So the appropriations are still similar to what was initially proposed. Some adjustments, and we'll talk about that. $735 million total appropriation with $196 million for the general fund. You'll see the breakdown by strategic priorities. Next slide. And you've talked a little bit about this in the earlier item. Ms. Bohatch indicated there were some adjustments in some of the federal awards, CDBG and Home Fund, and you'll see other adjustments in some of the revenue forecasts for a total of $53,000, almost $54,000, not significant. Next slide. When I presented the budget, there were several positions I indicated that would need to be adopted between proposal and final, and that was estimated at $506,000, $507,000 roughly. And we have gone back and we've downwardly revised that cost now. It's a little over $505,000, and partly due to some personnel adjustments in partial funding of the year. Next slide. And you'll see a detailed list of those adjustments for staffing primarily. That results in that $507,000. So you'll see those grant positions where funding's being discontinued, as well as some positions where we were, as well as some adjustments, to the cost of general administration in the Parks Department, as well as our contractual services with Network 180 and the Fire Department. Next slide. You also had robust discussion around some of the fees in the omnibus fee schedule, and this is a reminder of what has been adjusted from what was initially presented with those over 1,000 fees. So the parking system meter infraction, we had recommended an increase by $5. There was not support to the City Commission from the Commission in the discussion. We adjusted that back to what was the previous year's cost at $15. And you'll see the parking, and that was for non-central infractions, things that happen outside the downtown area. And you'll see the parking fine adjustment for odd eve parking. We had recommended an increase from $20 to $25, and just based on the various discussions that were on the dais, we had proposed a adjustment of what was half initially proposed, $22.50, $2.50. And Commissioner Perdue inquired about the Economic Development CIA Service Agreement fee, 5%. That budget that you just passed, as proposed, did not include any revenue from that proposed fee adjustment. That was part of a discussion item in the event that we would have proceeded with charging the authority, that the fee would have been in the schedule. And so to avoid any confusion, we just recommended deleting it, and we'll do further engagement. And if there's any outcome outcome from that engagement, we'll come back with an adjustment to the fee schedule. Next slide. The millage rate is unchanged from the proposed budget. And next slide. And I want to really thank all the staff. I had a listing of the various staff that had contributed to the process. So now I will do what Commissioner Sassi attempted to do, and I might get myself in trouble. But again, I already acknowledged Scott's work and all of his budget staff and their team for working on this. This is not just for us. The staff does a good job of making this digestible over 4 weeks, but this is months and months of work. As a matter of fact, they're always either preparing for a budget to propose or implementing a budget and do this work year-round, and every time do it with renewed sense of purpose, energy, and professionalism. So thank you and your staff for working with all the department directors who, in addition to their operational focus, and we have certainly had a lot of stuff happening on our city, make time to diligently pay attention to the administrative details of the budget. I want to thank my executive office team, Lou Canfield, who is not here today but has done a great job as chief of staff, as well as our strategy officer for making sure that the budget document is not just numbers. We can easily just give you a list of revenues, expenditures, and that's the minimum compliance of the charter. It's just propose all the department's costs, but we put context and policy and outcomes and put it in language where the numbers speak in a way that, where there's conversation more than the numbers just speaking for themselves. And that takes a lot. It's not just a calculator or Excel sheet. And so I want to thank you for making the budget practical and purposeful for both operation, for policy, as well as for citizen engagement. I want to thank the executive office staff. You heard a lot from the presentations from Deputy City Manager Behrens and Assistant City Manager Matthews, as well as the many questions that were responded to in the work sessions by all the directors who are sitting in the back of the room on the back row. Thank you so much for your diligence and work. And of course, I want to thank this commission for 4 weeks straight of a lot of intense discussion, but it is important, and I appreciate the feedback and the dialogue. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you. I'm sorry, Mr. Sandin, is there anything else that we should highlight before they vote?
No, sir, you did an exceptional job just kind of highlighting the changes from prelim to final. It really was a mix of kind of routine adjustments that we see annually, as well as putting forward those unfunded positions. So I think it's the adjustments that were anticipated today.
Actually, I have a note here and a question, if I may. Yeah. If we go to slide 8, the fiscal year 2026 fiscal plan adjustments to date, specifically to the parking system, the fee name of parking fine, seasonal parking, odd, even, the commission was actually at a 3-3 split, and I think we still need to discuss that on the proposed 2250. The yays, as I recall, for the 2250 mid-road was Commissioner Isasi, Mayor LeGrand, and Commissioner Robbins. The nays were Commissioner Perdue, myself, and Commissioner Belchak. Due to a important pre-scheduled event, Commissioner Knight was not able to be a part of that conversation, and I still believe that we need to decide today and have a majority of the commission either supporting the increase to 2250 or rejecting it. And I'd like to have that conversation now if we are able.
Mayor, may I make a suggestion in response to Commissioner Kilgore's comment?
Sure.
I think that's a good discussion to have, but since the item that you guys put on the floor was actually the property tax millage, I would recommend you go ahead, deliberate on that, vote on the millage, and then the next item is the fee schedule.
Sure.
Then you can pick up that conversation then.
Yep, great.
Thank you, City Manager. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure we didn't forget that.
Any discussion on the millage item then? Seeing none, I would ask for, we had a motion, I believe? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. That brings us to our next item, which is the resolution authorizing 26 service provision fees. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion? Commissioner Kilgore?
Yes.
You've already made your point.
Yes, so
And
the
I think we can boil that down to, A, if anyone's changed their position, please say so now. Otherwise, Commissioner Knight.
Honestly, understanding and listening to both sides of the framework, I don't deal with odd even, but there are a lot of community members that do, and looking at what people are doing or how they're being impacted, how their finances are being impacted. I think I'm leaning more towards the nay side with the rest of the group and keeping the number where it is currently as we continue to look at what our economy looks like and what people's incomes are looking like and how it's really impacting our community.
Thank you. I will, I think that's a 4-3 for leaving things as they stand. I would point out, as we think about this, we use a how much do services cost model, and we did in this budget, we're going to approve broad increases to fees for things like having a block party, and those are going up to reflect the cost of actually administering them. So we're going to be passing a budget where the cost of having a block party goes up, but the cost of not complying with city regulations doesn't go up. But that's the will of the commission. Any further discussion on provision fees?
Yes, Mayor. I don't recall, I hear you, these are important things to weigh, but I do not recall getting feedback from city staff that this was going to be a more challenge to continue to give tickets. What I remember is this was specifically around compliance. That was the discussion that I remember, that we were sort of hoping to raise the tickets to hope that our neighbors would comply more with odd and even parking. That's what I recall.
It's both. It's both compliance as well as the fee hadn't been adjusted in some time, so.
Okay.
It's both.
And I will thank you for that, City Manager. And I will also say block parties are important, but, this is, the odd and even is something that I believe that every resident could possibly, or a majority of residents may, or more residents rather than folks throwing a block party, may be impacted by. So that's when we're thinking of trying to save folks money in their pocketbook, as we talked about in fiscal committee today, of a possible recession. Most folks saying recession. This is where my decision since the beginning of this has come from. But thank you so much for everyone's a very robust discussion on this.
Were there other, Commissioner Sassi?
Mine was just more a process issue. So now that this was what was presented, then do we need a formal amendment? Or, obviously we're taking the budget as a whole, so I'll look to the parliamentarians just.
Yeah. So if this is what's presented, so if there is a change to that, we would need to amend the schedule in that specific line. What number is that on the schedule, Scott? Can you tell us? Whatever the line item is, we would go back and adjust it to.
I don't recall the specific line item, but we will be able to adjust that and resubmit that item.
Great. So Commissioner Kilgore, are you making a motion then for an amendment?
Yes, motion to amend the parking fine, seasonal parking odd even to the original $20 fee, I believe, as it stands for the previous fiscal year.
Support?
Support.
And I think we may as well do a roll call vote since it's going to be close. Commissioner Kilgore?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Or yes.
Clerk should be probably calling this out, not me.
Mayor, can you just have a little bit more clarity? Could you repeat that again, please?
Yes, Commissioner Perdue. I'd like to amend for the schedule. We don't have the specific schedule number, but to amend for the parking fine, seasonal parking odd and even to to remain at the $20, which was the past fiscal year's fine for this, rather than the preliminary, which was $25, or the middle road that was recently proposed, which was $22.50. So for the price to remain at $20 rather than any increase at this time.
Thank you.
We got our support?
Got the support.
All right. Commissioner Kilgore?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Robbins?
No.
Commissioner Yasasi?
No.
Commissioner Perdue?
Yes.
Commissioner Belcheck?
Yes.
Mayor LaGrand?
No. Motion carries.
All right, so we will have that adjustment in the afternoon meeting on the fee schedule, making that only one item. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Now, I believe we have an initial motion on the
Oh, that's right, that's
floor
just the motion.
to pass the now amended resolution. Any other discussion at this point? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to our next resolution, approving naming a new park space, and our Parks Director is here. We've had significant discussion about this at previous meetings, but now we are at the point of making a decision on this issue. So if you could refresh our memories briefly, Director, that'd be great.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, before we go, did we have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. David Markworth, Director of Parks and Recreation. A little over a year ago, we embarked on a park naming process, the first of its kind under the new park naming policy. The team behind me here worked very hard and diligently to make this a very fair, very transparent, and a very robust process. I believe wholeheartedly that it was just that. As a reminder, the process included development of a stakeholder group of 10 neighborhood residents formed to oversee the process. Citywide name submissions were encouraged with materials available in multiple languages. Targeted outreach was for the renaming process was sent to neighbors living within a quarter-mile radius of the park. From that outreach, 164 name suggestions were received. And the stakeholder group of 10 residents unanimously selected 6 finalists that we reviewed with you the evening of the public hearing a few weeks back. So that brings us to today, and we had 4 speakers at the public hearing, one of whom was opposed to the name that was being proposed, and 3 others that were perhaps somewhere in between. So that brings us to today for deliberation and consideration of this recommended name by the residents and this stakeholder group.
Thank you. Discussion. Commissioner Belcheck.
So I would like, if you would take a moment to review how many citywide votes you received and what the breakdown was between all of the 6 names that were put forward.
Give me 1 minute. I'm turning to my colleague for some support on this.
I mean, I could rattle them off if you want. But I think it's better if it comes from you guys.
Do you have those, Victoria? Bear with us 1 second.
Why don't we come back to that? Is there another question while they look it up?
Commissioner Knight, you had a question or a comment?
Kind of a statement. Having talked to a number of stakeholders in this process and hearing the concerns, not only around kind of how the process went and some of the hiccups that were in the midst of the process, but also really thinking about our community's heritage and the feeling of people constantly being left out of conversations, not included in conversations, their voices not really being heard, like a performative type of procedure that has happened where they feel like they're bringing their voice to the table and their voice is not being considered in some of these decisions. And I feel like as a community, we have an opportunity to really step back and think about how we're including and asking people to use their time, their volunteer hours where they're not being paid, to be a part of the process and the growth of this community, and being able to really listen to what they're saying and take those things into account. And that's not discounting any of the work that has been done, but it's also looking back and saying, where are we not looking through other lenses? Where are we not taking into consideration the thoughts and concerns of our community members, especially identifying and thinking about the history of this community and how things have shifted and changed across neighborhoods and communities. So I think, before Commissioner Belcheck continues on, I personally would like to step back from naming this today and really go back and be able to ask more questions of the people who were involved in this and redo this again. I think because once you put a name out there, it's really hard to retract that. It's hard to take those things back. And so I think it's really important that as we move forward with this, we have an opportunity to make sure that we're doing it right, even though it was a new process and we thought that we had it right. We don't always get things perfect. And so the opportunity for us to really try to get this right and make sure that we are inclusive of all people and all the voices that were a part of this decision are in the decision-making process.
So Commissioner, you need to make a motion to table this?
So I'm making a motion to table this today.
Okay.
And that we come back and that the process is worked through again, and that we make sure that all the necessary voices are at the table before we make this decision. Is that right?
I will support that,
Let's have-
but we can finish our discussion too.
So the previous motion was to approve this. So I think there was already a motion that was on the table, then you made this, I guess, second motion table. I just want to make sure we understand. So if we do this, the recommendation now in tabling would be to continue with the name Navarro. Go do whatever, we need to talk about whatever engagement that means, but we're coming back to the same recommendation. We're just tabling it now. So if you don't want to accept the staff recommendation, it would have been better just to not approve the name. And then we go back and we start all over with the new process, and out of that process, we'll bring forward what comes from that process, because tabling it is just bringing Navarro back for
Okay, so we don't want to approve the name.
So Commissioner Knight, you're withdrawing your motion?
Yeah, I'll withdraw that motion, but I want to not approve the name.
Understood. So we're in discussion now of the original motion.
Okay.
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 Others want to be heard on the discussion part?
I would like,
The person that seconded withdraws this.
I would be happy to withdraw. I'm happy to let Commissioner Yusazi go. I do have some more that I would like to, when I come back to me.
Okay. Commissioner Sassi?
Sure. I didn't know if you all were prepared, but I can go ahead and share my thoughts. I think after the last meeting, and this is maybe where there is, there's some uncertainty, right, as we're talking about this around the table, and thank you all for keeping us on the parliamentary process, because most of the time we are voting affirmatively and we approve it affirmatively. That is what happens. So, I too heard some concerns, and I think I shared that at the commission meeting. And so I feel like those responses weren't answered. So that's why I would also be voting no at this time. I think I don't want this to be such a binary decision, because I do appreciate the work that was done. I also think this being the first time we've done that, and we're doing it with a new commission body, is taking that step back to say what are the things that occurred. I think there is such a history in this community. Obviously, there was a street renaming that happened over here, and people, I think I don't want to take away, and honestly, I got a really crappy message after this from somebody who sent me some really crappy things, and some of you know that email, and it wasn't nice. And what I think it did, it was trying to pit the Black and the brown community against each other, and that's what I don't want to occur. I think there is a history of the Black community in this region. There's a history of the Latino community in this region, and there's going to probably be a history of other communities moving in this region. And so I think what, after talking to my colleague, Commissioner Knight, in the past, is just, there's some questions that aren't answered about, I think there was a question like, was a meeting canceled? Were people's voices missed? And so I feel like that hasn't been answered. And so I always want to explain why I would vote no on something. I think when you vote no, you should also offer an alternative. And to me, the alternative would be, how do we come back and say, we've got some different people around the table too, so let's not deny that. And to say, this was the first time, and sometimes we do things, I think we've learned, I'm looking at you, Mr. Matthews, on the participatory budgeting, right? We did that one time, and we had a whole plan, and there were things that we needed to adjust. And so sometimes there are things where there is very much a definite, like, right, the cost of, what it is going to be for an infraction of odd even. What do you want it to be? What do you not want it to be? I think for the ability to make sure that there is, cohesiveness in this neighborhood, that's what I would support. I also want to thank the very hard work that was done for the people that voted. And, I think that would be the best thing at this time. So thank you.
Do you have
Any other? Yeah, if I could just clarify in the cancellation of the meeting, I know that was a point of contention. And I did provide clarification through the city manager's office with regards to that concern and that question. I do hope that it reached all of you. That clarification did indeed note that there was the last meeting, the committee meeting, that was canceled or delayed because the public vote was kept open longer than anticipated. At the close of that public naming submission process, the committee was asked again if they would like to reschedule that meeting, to which there was no response back to our department. At that point, we then proceeded with notifying the committee of the next steps, whether or not there were any questions. The department received no questions. So I feel like we did communicate clearly as to what was desired and what next steps would be, and we never received any response.
If I could respond to David. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think sometimes we're dealing in what is, what occurred, and then also what is the feeling. And I think our job as a commission sometimes is maybe not so much, yes, it is on what occurred, but what is the feeling? And so I think what I would hate is something that is absolutely, a wonderful thing and a positive thing to have connotations that maybe, whether it was reality or perception, right? And so others who brought those forth are not here, so I want to recognize that too. And so that perception is there, and so I think now we're at that point where we have to kind of deal with the perception, and sometimes that can have deeper wounds. And so I know in this community, there have been things in the past, like this is not putting this all on you, Mr. Marquardt, but, I think about Auburn Hills neighborhood in the city, in the 2nd Ward, and why that neighborhood got started is because, and then, kind of what happened is, like, originally there was a price put out, and then the price wasn't accepted, and there was a whole history of that. And so in that case, that was true, but I think that there are these perceptions sometimes, or feelings. And so I think our job as the commission is to, how do we kind of heal some of those wounds? How do we recognize them? How do we say, hey, we felt like we did this and you didn't do this, and you felt like we did this and we didn't do it. And so I think we're kind of more at that point. And so thank you for saying that, because I always, want to make sure that those in the city are, obviously the work is highlighted. So anyways, I'm rambling on, but I stand by my vote.
I do want to just jump in briefly here as we move forward, but I do question, I understand that no response, no question seems to be the measure, but maybe they weren't by email, maybe they were by a voicemail, maybe they were by being in a meeting in a shop somewhere, and those kinds of things count as saying I wanted more. And so those are the kinds of comments that I am hearing from the community in this neighborhood. And one of the, so the process of this, and I think my colleagues have hit this on the nose in the discussion here, that this is our newest park to be named since 2011. And the reality is there were 209 votes citywide. If you guys have that number, but I'm sure that was right. And that's a okay survey for 6 names being picked from, but the distribution of that data was very relatively even. And there were 2 that were the top with only a 3-vote difference. And in my opinion, as a statistical analysis, it's very hard to say you had a clear front runner. Yes, you had a number that was bigger than one other number, but to me, just as a common sense kind of approach to the data would have been to say, we have essentially a statistical tie. There's been 209, not a huge sample for the whole citywide. A 54 to 51 vote is very close. It's like half of your population there for the stats. A second round of voting to whittle it down you've gone from 6 to 2 to go from 2 to 1 would have been beneficial and could still be beneficial, because in the end, the people living across the street or down the road from this park are going to have to look at that name every single day. And to Commissioner Isazi's point, we don't want to have this generating a negative connotation every time, a negative energy in the neighborhood every time this goes through. And for those people who have been trying to raise the question, trying to get response from the department, it can feel like it's disjointed sometimes, and that there isn't, maybe a clear line of communication from the bottom front line to the top. And that's not saying that your staff aren't doing great work or that the community didn't weigh in and have great ideas. Clearly, 164 names were generated, so there was community engagement around this. But I would also not agree with your analysis on the public hearing that there were 4 people who talked, but only 1 opposed. I heard more opposition on all of those. And there were people in the downstairs who were not allowed up that night because of the long and full room that ended up leaving. And I was told later there were 3 or 4 people that would have talked that also did not want this. And we have been receiving things as a commission too. So I personally, after our last conversation, was hoping that the department would have taken some more direction and reviewed that. But since this is the process going forward, I personally am not in favor of this name at this time. I think that the process needs to be reevaluated. The second name of Unity Park, or some combination of the two, if we did another round of engagement with nearby neighbors as a third option, would you be okay with, would be okay too. But I don't think I can approve this name at this time.
Commissioner Robbins.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I echo a lot of what's been said so far. I'm always careful about wanting to set a precedent when we do something. I think, as has been mentioned, there's been probably some opportunity to review what the engagement process looks like when we have a situation like this. Again, it's been a decade and a half since we've had this same situation come before us previously. So I think, from the public comment, the emails I've received, it's not that there's necessarily frustration with the 2 names that it's come down to, but rather just that they were so close and we're moving forward with one over the other with only a difference of a couple votes, as my colleague has said. So to me, it makes sense to maybe just bring it back to a vote between those final 2 if it's that close. I think that is the best use of the staff resources. I haven't really heard any feedback from the community saying we want to scrap it and start with all new names. I think there's some good contenders that people are happy with. It's just a matter of how the final is picked. So whatever way to move forward in that manner, whether it's an amendment to this or a postponement to allow for the staff to just open it up to a final vote between those last 2 to give better clarity on what the community wants the park to be named. That seems like the wisest approach in my opinion, but open to other thoughts too.
Thank you. Any other comments, input? So I'll weigh in here a little bit, and I don't want to lean too heavily on this, but We have, as a commission, a limited amount of resources. The city has a limited amount of resources. And so I think anytime we're making a decision, we can always say, oh, we should have taken more time to make the decision. We should have got more community input. I mean, that can sort of be an infinite. If you define there wasn't enough input, you can always claim there wasn't enough input. And anytime that there's a close election, there's going to be an impulse for the people who didn't prevail in that election to feel like, boy, if things had only been a little different, and to want to do over. I think we see that at every presidential cycle. Everyone wishes that things had gone a little differently if they're on the losing side of a presidential election, for example. I think that I am hesitant to apply 20/20 hindsight to something too, where people engaged in good faith in a decision and then you have a result. And so that's sort of saying, well, we were just kidding. We had this process and we're not going to use it now. We're going to go back because the people who didn't prevail aren't happy with the result. That's a dangerous thing to say. And I think that I think there's an impulse also for 20/20 hindsight to say, well, we could have designed the system better. My first reaction in those situations is always say, great, well, let's design it better for next time. But a little bit like if you're playing a game of basketball and then you change the rules after you played to say you won rather than you lost. Or, I mean, you can change the three-point line for a basketball game, but you probably should change it before you play the game, not after you play the game. I also certainly, I mean, the word performative was brought up briefly, and I tend to think of that as a negative word. And so I don't want to suggest that I think that the park staff did a good job of trying to engage here. Now, I don't want to hold them to a standard of perfection. I don't want to hold myself to a standard of perfection. So when when a lawyer looks at things, if you screw up and you get the wrong number of people on a jury, you did something wrong enough to have to retry the case. If you do minor things wrong, that doesn't necessarily invalidate the result. I mean, no process is perfect. So that being said, oddly enough, usually I think there's an inclination among all of us to vote collaboratively when there's a sentiment on an issue, and usually that's on a yes, but I'm hearing at least 4 no votes here. So having expressed all that, and I hope I was heard by staff, I am going to vote no here too, because I think this is a tough call decision, and I will defer to the sentiment of my colleagues, even though I might have been instinctively a yes on this because I want to support the work of staff. I also want to be supportive of my colleagues on the dais, and so thank you. And I think that I hope you heard that a couple things. One might be a sudden death elimination process where you scrape all the other names if you get down to a final 2 and just vote between those final 2. If that's logistically not a whole lot of work, might be a good model for the future. It's sort of like choice order voting. But the other suggestion I heard was to send it back with doing exactly that. And I don't think that in this instance, we're asking you to do another 2 years of re-engagement here. We're asking you to just get clarity with a single up-down vote on that binary option. And I hope we don't wind up with a complete stalemate, because if we wind up with an equal number of votes, then we'll have to figure out what to do with that problem. I guess we'd have to vote to split the tie. But in any case, I think I'll join my colleagues on that. So thank you, Director. So if I can have a vote on the motion. Let's see, we had a motion on this already? Who is the mover? I'm sorry. Okay. Do you want to? Sorry, I don't know how much of a purist you are on this. If you're going to vote no on this, do you want to move for something that you're going to vote no on?
It's already up for vote, so everybody just vote it up or down.
Laws of the Medes and Persians. You can't withdraw your motion. So I'd ask for a vote then on this, unless there's further discussion.
I just want a point of clarity, just so people understand. My comments are never to demean anyone. or to belittle the work that is done, because y'all work a 9 to 5 and you work really hard and you do great work. So it's not that. It's just we have to also take in all the information, not only from what you guys bring to us, but also what we're hearing in the community. That's our role. That's what we're supposed to do. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to y'all.
Mayor, if I could in response, thank you for that. I think we have to set the tone for civility among community conversation, among the dais and among the staff, so that I appreciate the clarity. And in support of not the outcome, but the process. And I think that's what the mayor was trying to do. The rules of engagement from the beginning was clearly defined with the Parks Advisory Board and the community. And I think the staff did a outstanding job of maintaining integrity with the process. And that process called for a community vote, it called for a public hearing, and then it called for your final deliberation today. We were asked by several members of the community, several of you, to change the process in the midst of the process. And that is something that I'm uncomfortable doing, because I think you said it earlier, we're dealing with an elected governing public body. We're talking about voting. Voting integrity is very important. And so the fact that we were trying to honor what came through the process, I think, speaks to us not using our individual discretion. After the vote, I would like clarity, because I heard some say only bring back the top two, and I heard others say offer a third option of a combined name. So I don't want to redo this again. I think this has taken a lot of staff effort, so it would be, after your vote, to be clear on if you're asking our professional judgment of what to bring back, or is this what you are only interested in hearing from the community. Because at the end of the day, there's a deceased person's name on this resolution, and I want to honor the family and that person as well. And this is not about anything reflective of that individual. It's just about us now redefining this process.
Yep, thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could call a roll call vote.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Asasi,
Wait, what are we?
We're voting on.
Support. Pardon me, Mr. Mayor.
Clarify.
So if you would say that, if
a
I'm
resolution
sorry.
approving the naming of a new park space
No.
at 680, okay. Commissioner Asasi,
No.
Commissioner Robbins.
No.
Commissioner Belcheck.
No.
Commissioner Perdue. No. Commissioner Kilgore.
No.
Mayor LaGrand.
No. Now, if I could have a brief go down the row and just briefly, so I think the question is either do we want to direct staff to go back and have an up-down vote on those two names, or propose a third, and I think it would be a Unity-Navarro Park as an option. So you're in favor of sending back vote for two or vote for three? Commissioner Kilgore?
I'm in favor of all three. I think that's fair.
Okay. Commissioner Knight?
That's
Commissioner
fine.
Robbins?
Support.
Sounds like you got three. So Commissioner Perdue?
Yeah, I think really where the challenge came was that meeting that was canceled and the conversation that was missed there, particularly because there were some names that were so close. So I think we send it back to that stage. I don't think it's our role to tell them what name to consider or what process to execute, follow the process. What process to execute from this point forward. I think it's picking back up at that last meeting that was missed, and let the advisory body make the decisions on how they want to approach. If they want to just do the two, if they want to do the three, I think that's up to them to come back. But I think the most important thing is having that last opportunity for them to discuss and decide together. That's what the feedback was. I felt that it was missed.
Okay. Commissioner Belcheck?
I would be in favor of the three, but I did want to try to interject and missed the opportunity, so I'm glad Commissioner Perdue did mention that too, because I do think that is where the process went off the rails, in that reviewing that particular result of the nearly tie, that stakeholder group really needed to be engaged in making that decision. Do we do more engagement? Do we not? That's really how the process would have been. And we may need to look at the policy. I thought you had sent it to me, but I couldn't find it again on what the policy actually had required the staff to do. So that's just another point to look forward
Yep, thanks. And I'll add my vote to the send back 3 for community consideration. So I think you've got direction there. Thank you. That brings us to our briefing on the current year's, or the upcoming year's budget. And City Manager?
I think I've concluded my remarks earlier, so I have nothing else to add.
Great. That then brings us to wrapping this up before 11 o'clock. But before we do that, I think we have, I would entertain a motion that we go into closed session for consideration of pending litigation.
So moved.
Support.
Madam Clerk, if you call the roll.
Commissioner Belcheck?
Yes.
Commissioner Kilgore?
Yes.
Commissioner Purdue?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Robbins?
Yes.
Commissioner Asasi?
Yes.
Mayor LaGrand?
Yes. Motion passes. A reminder to everyone, public safety will be happening at 12:30, and that concludes the meeting.